Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hi everyone. Last chapter we have learned the project and subchapter on the chapter 4. And now this video gonna present about the chapter 5, which is the scope and the work breakdown structure.
Next, triple constraint. As we know, projects require time, money, people, and technology. Resources provide the means for achieving our project's MOV and also act as a constraint. When we know what we want to achieve, then we can figure out the way to accomplish it. However, there are some cases that stakeholders add new requirements into the project development. That the project team will be surely need more resources and will have to put in more effort in terms of budget and time. For example, nowadays, the labor to build a system is more expensive than the technology itself. As the salary increases, the cost of the project will become more expensive. According to the situation, if workers have additional works, then their time and the cost associated with the time spent doing unscheduled work must be added to the project schedule and budget. This kind of relationship is called triple constraint. Triple constraint will be in balance or in harmony state if the stakeholder expectations are clear. The project is in balance or in harmony when the schedule and budget support the project scopes in order to achieve the MOV. If stakeholders know what value to expect from the project, what work will be done, how long it will take, and how much the project will cost, then it could ease the process of development. Why project can be imbalanced? As you can see here, the project becomes imbalanced when the scope increases without adjusting schedule and budget accordingly. When the scope increases, the budget and time will be increased. For example, technology nowadays keep evolving and have new features. Thus, project manager and teams are developing the current project. Stakeholders could add the new requirements to get customer attention to meet their needs.
Let's continue with the defining and managing project scope. Scope management process. The first one is to plan scope management, which is to develop a scope management plan, which is can be defined as how the project and product scope will be defined, verified, and changed if necessary. The second one is the collect requirement. Collect requirement is focusing on the engaging customer or stakeholders, which can be used in different many methods, such as interviews, workshop, or brainstorming sessions. The third one is to define scope. So define scope is to develop a detailed description of the project and product. The fourth one is to create WBS, which is the work breakdown structure, to organize scope into management work packages. The fifth one is the validate scope processes, which is to formal acceptance of all deliverables. And last but not least, the control scope process, which is the processes for managing all the scope changes. Let's get into the details of the defined scope process. So let's touch on the scope boundary first. So the figure that can be seen is any work within the scope boundary should include only the work or activities that support the project's MOV. So this work is what we want to capture and keep within our fence. The project can do a lot of project activities which is not achieving the project MOV. This can be impactful as the time and resources will be wasted. So to have a clear definition of MOV, definitely important for defining and managing the scope boundary. Methodologies such as the SDLC, the System Development Lifecycle. So project-oriented deliverables require time and resources and therefore must be part of the overall project schedule and budget. Their role is to ensure that the project processes are being completed so that the product or system achieve the project's MOV. And they allow the project manager to set a baseline for performance and quality control because they usually require some form of approval before work on the next project phase or deliverable begins. So for example, using the deliverable structure chart, a tool used by the project manager and a team. The second one will be the product-oriented scope. So product-oriented scope is identifying the specific features and functionality of the application system. So this is the first cut of requirement definition. So for an example will be the use case diagram, a system modeling tool used for defining the scope boundary and defining what the system must do. So the development of a use case diagram is an iterative process that can be developed using any methods for collecting requirements such as interviews, workshop, brainstorming session, or focus groups.
Validate scope. Why we need to validate the scope? Validation will test and validate the actual product to ensure it has been developed correctly. As for the project, it helps to find changes or issues during project rather than at the end. So the validation process should include first verification of the MOV. At this point in the project, the MOV should be clear, defined, and agreed upon. Failure to define and agree on the MOV could result in scope changes later in the project. Next, documentation of all deliverables. Whether the deliverable tangible or variable or support the project MOV. Thus, we cannot ignore all these requirements. Third, specification of quality standard. We need to know the project are control in place to ensure that work was not only completed but completed to meet specific standard. Next, identification of milestone. In short, milestone tell us that deliverable was not only completed but also reviewed and accepted. Next, lastly, review and acceptance. The project scope must be reviewed and accepted by the project stakeholder. The project team must be clear on what it must deliver. In both cases, expectation must be realistic and agreed upon.
So next, I will be explain about control scope. Control scope is concerned with managing actual changes to the project scope as and when they occur to ensure that any changes to the project scope will be beneficial. So basically, it is about understanding and managing the triple constraints, which is the scope, schedule, and budget. The benefits of the control scope are it keeps the project manager in control of the project, allow the project manager to manage and control the project schedule and budget, and then it will allow the project team to stay focused and on track. So next, there are three potential issues or risks in control scope. So the first one is scope creep. So scope creep describes project team's inability to define the project scope. For example, project team and sponsor have trouble understanding what the project is supposed to accomplish. So scope creep can be minimized by having a clearly defined measurable organizational value, which is MOV. Next is scope creep. Scope creep refers to increasing featureism. For example, project team itself may come across interesting or novel ideas as the project work progresses. Its enthusiasm for adding these ideas can divert its attention or add features and function to the product or system that the project sponsor did not ask for and does not need. So scope creep must be identified and controlled throughout the project because it will lengthen the project schedule, can lead to cost overruns. So the last one is scope leak. Scope leak suggests a fundamental and significant change in the project scope. So it occurs as a result of changes in the environment, the business, and the competitive makeup of the industry. So for example, original scope for the bank's project was to provide new products and services to its customers. Scope creep may be adding a new feature, such as a new product or service not originally defined the project scope. But scope leap, on the other hand, is an impetus to change the project so that the electronic commerce system will allow the bank to obtain additional funding in the open market. So next is the scope change control procedures. So this allow for the identification and handling of all requested changes to the project scope. A scope change procedure may include a scope change request form. The scope change request form needs to contain the description of the change request, and then scope change should be justified to separate the wood lights from the must-haves, and then lastly, several alternatives may be listed to assess the impact on scope, schedule, resources, and cost. The key decision makers, for example, the project sponsor, customer, governance committee, etc., must understand and approve these changes because the baseline project plan will have to be adjusted accordingly.
So, what is WBS? WBS represents a logical decomposition of the work to be performed. In other words, it also focuses on how the product, service, or result is naturally divided. In short, the WBS will outline all of the work that the project team will be performed. There are several benefits of using WBS. WBS is used to develop the project plan and helps link the project scope to the schedule and budget. This WBS will help in providing a framework to develop a tactical plan in order to structure the project work. Next is the work package. A work package is smaller components and more manageable units of work which provide a logical basis for defining project activities. Work package also will help in assigning resources to those activities. This is to ensure that all the project work is identified. So based on this diagram here, this work package starts with the project itself. Then the project will decompose into phases. Each phases will be divided into two, which is deliverable and milestone. The deliverable will further decompose into two, that are activity or task, and milestone where it is deliverable completion. Next is the deliverables versus milestone. Deliverable can include such things as presentation, reports, plans, prototypes, and the final application, while the milestone only focus on the achievement. Example like deliverable is like a prototype of user interface, while the milestone is the formal acceptance of the user interface. So with the formal acceptance of the user interface, only then the project team can move on to the next phase of the project. So for the milestone, it is significant events or achievement where it provides evidence whether a deliverable has been completed or the phase has been formally over. Next, it keeps the team's focus, which is better to focus our attention and effort on a series of smaller and short-term deliverables than a larger deliverable. Next milestone also is realistic as it motivates the project team when their attainment is viewed as success. It also reduces risk by acting as cruxes or what we call as proof of concept. A crux can be the testing of an idea which is critical to the project success. Not only that, milestones also provide a mechanism for quality control. The completion of the user's interface deliverable should end only with the user's acceptance, or otherwise the team will be forced to make a revision. Next is the deliverable test results report. So first, we need to review the test plan with the client so that the key stakeholders are clear as to what we will be testing, how we will conduct the test, and when the test will be carried out. This review may be done as a courtesy or because we need a specific support from the client's organization and therefore must inform the client when that support will be required. Second, after we have informed the client that we will test the system, we basically carry out the test outline in the test plan. Next, once the test results are collected, we need to analyze them. After we analyze the test results, we will need to summarize them in the form of a report and presentation to the client. Lastly, if all goes well, the client will approve or sign off on the test results. Then we can move on to the implementation phase of our project. If all does not go well, we need to address and fix any problems. Keep in mind that the test phase is not complete just because we have developed a test plan and created a test report. The client will need to sign off on the test results only if the system meets a certain predetermined quality standard.
In project estimation, there are two things that we will be estimating, which is the project schedule and budget. So how or where do we start estimating? Firstly is by estimating the time taken to complete a particular task. Next is by estimating the cost that corresponds with the completion of the task. Here we have 6 estimation techniques, which are guesstimating, the Delphi technique, time boxing, top-down technique, bottom-up technique, and poker planning. The first estimation technique is guesstimating, which means an estimation made by guessing or randomly selecting numbers. Guesstimating is one of the least accurate and not ideal way for planning a project's budget and schedule. The second technique is the Delphi technique, which is an estimation made by a group of experts where they will discuss on a certain topic and concludes with an agreement. The estimations are done anonymously, and each of the experts will give and compare their estimations to one another. Then, if their estimations are very close and similar, they can be averaged as one whole estimation. But if not, another discussion is held to evaluate the differences in their old estimates and a new estimate will be made. The technique is time boxing, which means a box or space of time is allocated for a sprint, or simply to say, to do a certain task. Time boxing is usually used in agile projects, and they can also be used when we want to focus on the development of a specific activity or task in a given time. Next is top-down technique, which determines on the entire project's budget and timeline, which is often done by the senior or upper management. The data based on previous projects are typically used by the managers in applying percentages and ensures the estimates will remain reasonable. Moving on is the bottom-up technique, which compared to the top-down technique, instead of determining the project's schedule and budget as one whole, bottom-up technique breaks the project into smaller modules and calculates the time and effort required for each module separately. As we learn about the work breakdown structure, it serves as the basis for this technique since it has defined all of the project phases and activities, which we call it as work packages. Last one is poker planning. Knowingly, it is a version of the Delphi technique, which is further improved by using a deck of cards or sequences like the Fibonacci numbers. In poker planning, all of the project team members will get together and do estimations by using poker as its medium. This technique consists of players, which are the team members, and a moderator who will describe a particular task, deliverable, feature,